Welcome to the Real Estate Reserve Podcast. I'm Jason Balin from Hard Money Bankers. Next to me, Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. Ian, what's the good word today, my friend?
Well, the good news is the dollar bill's still worth something. We're out here. We're enjoying our lives. It's almost warm enough to play golf every day. It's still just a touch cold here in Maryland and Philadelphia area. I thought it was supposed to get to 65, but I don't know. I know a couple of our golf pro friends are getting ready for a big event next week, so there's a lot going on. I got the little bit of the golf itch. We were just in Florida, so
I don't know. One state south, it's warm enough.
I know.
I don't know what's happening up in your neck of the woods. So, anyways, got a great show. If you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome. We promise we'll keep this entertaining and informative for you. And if you're a regular viewer or follower, thanks again for tuning in with us. Today, in a second, we're going to bring in Seth Williams of REI Tipster. And we're going to talk about, to me, it's a unique real estate strategy, but it's obviously not unique to Seth. And maybe Ian knows a little bit about it, but we're going to talk a little bit about land flipping. I'm excited to hear, I'm always excited to hear other successful real estate investors and entrepreneurs share not only their startup story, but kind of the ins and outs of their actual real estate niche that's made them successful.
100%. And, if you guys get any value out of this, the best way to share it the same way our guests come in here and share. If, you get any value out of this, please feel free to share it, leave a comment. That's how we get people to come on. More importantly, that's how we all gain value by sharing this content. I watch when other people share people's videos, and you always pick up a nugget. And along those lines, that's actually where I met Seth. I met Seth at a mastermind because a friend of mine invited me out there. We kind of co-host the mastermind together, and I took a ride out to Columbus, Ohio. Everybody knows Ohio is my favorite state in the whole country. And I had the pleasure of meeting Seth, and Seth has a pretty big following. We got talking, and he's like, yeah, I just do land. I'm like, land? He's like, yeah, I just do land. I flip land. I'm like, I never really thought about it. I don't think we've ever had a land flipper on our show, so we might as well bring Seth in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Seth, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. What's going on? Is it still snowing in Michigan?
I think it stopped yesterday. It's kind of weird. Right, we had like 80-degree summer weather last week, and now it's like back in the 30s again. So
yeah,
I don't know what's going on.
Not cool, dude. Not cool. So either way, Seth, I don't know if you want to just introduce yourself, let everyone know kind of, what you do and go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I do a few different things in the real estate realm. Probably what I'm most known for is running retipster.com, which is a blog and community I started back in 2012, where I just kind of talk about what I know. And I share the things that have worked for me and things that don't work for me. And there's always lots of stuff to talk about. So probably once or twice a week, we'll put something out and give a little tip or a trick on how to work in the business. And in terms of actual like implementation, probably what I'm most known for is land investing, because that was the first thing I ever really found success at. And that's probably what I know the most about. So that ends up being sort of the cornerstone of the things that I talk about. But a lot of times what works in land can also be applied to other real estate investing strategies too. So, and just this past year, I'm finishing up my first ever storage facility development, and we're opening it up like as we speak. So
Nice.
I can't say I'm an expert at that, but I'm getting there. I'm on my way.
I mean, none of our real estate investments work without land, right? Like Jason can't lend on money. I can't buy assets. You can't develop assets without land.
Yeah.
I got to ask, was real estate like your first career path outside of high school or college, or did you have a different career trajectory prior to that?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted it to be, but my first like actual job out of college was like working for a small business financing company doing SBA 504 loans. So I spent about 9 years doing that. And then shortly after I started that job, I discovered land. I was doing that as a side hustle. So yeah, I guess it was actually pretty useful to do that financing side of things, just understanding like how commercial deals are put together and how the financing side works and how unreasonable banks are with what they require sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're getting bad again.
Yep. I'm sure.
But so then like you're lending, and you said you stumbled into land. Like, did you take a pit stop at trying to do rentals first or flipping houses? Did you do any of that before you got into land?
Yeah, I tried. So starting in about 2005, 2006, that was when I was still in college, and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, as many of us have, and the light bulb went off, and I figured I got to do real estate, but I had no idea what I was doing. So I spent hours and hours looking at MLS listings and trying to find houses to flip and rent out, and the numbers just never worked. And it's just like, how do people do this, man? Like I couldn't figure out how to pay what these people wanted for their properties and make money from them. And part of it was the market was pretty hot at that time, but
Yeah.
a bigger part of it was I had no idea how to find deals. Like I had no competitive advantage. And it was when I discovered the land business that I also discovered direct mail and how to get very specific types of lists and go after specific types of property owners and make super low offers that would actually get accepted from time to time. And that was when everything changed. And I could have done this with houses, but I don't know how well I would have done with that, because houses, they just, there's more complexity to it. Like there's more things to inspect and things can fall apart and dealing with tenants and contractors and stuff. And land was just a much simpler thing. Like a lot of that just wasn't there, which made it easier to manage. And even psychologically, just not having to think about so many of those pieces moving around.
Yeah, makes sense. And like you are right. The 05, 06, 07 is a tough time to enter the space.
Yeah.
in general, just because, all of a sudden, like, you lose your shirt real quick because it's like, oh, this seems like a good deal. And then boom,
Yeah.
bottoms out.
Yeah.
Walk us through how land flipping works. Like, I mean, I think, maybe it works exactly how it sounds, like residential flipping, like a fix and flip, but like, how does that work? And I'm sure there's a few different strategies, but maybe just walk us through a little bit for all the listeners.
Sure. I mean, there's different ways you can go about it, but what most people do and how I got started was, I found, I got a list from the county of all the people that were past due on their property taxes. And I just sent them a postcard saying, hey, I'm looking to buy land. If you want to sell, give me a call. And, especially at that time, I mean, nobody else was doing this, going after land specifically. So land was like the leftover junk that nobody wanted. So I got lots of calls back from people, and I could make just absurdly low offers, and a lot of people would accept them. And I think a lot of land deals, at least the ones that I started out with, were rinky-dink lots. They weren't super expensive. Like the first property I bought was a half acre, and I paid $331 for it, cash, free and clear. I was able to close without a title company. I mean, there's no funding or loans involved. It's just literally sign a deed. You're done. And then I listed it for sale on Craigslist. In 11 days later, I sold it for $1,900 cash. So not huge dollars, but it was the kind of thing where it's like, man, I just made a fair amount of money in there, and that wasn't that hard. Like, what if I just did that over and over again, or did bigger versions of that? And so that was what I did. I kept sending mail that same way, and over the years, the business has definitely changed. I mean, there's more people doing it now, which makes it a little bit harder. It just means you have to send out more mail and make higher offers. But as long as you can get properties in that, 10 to 40% of market value range, maybe higher if there's potential to develop it and alter it in some way, there's plenty of profit margin. And there's always that benefit of there's no people there. So it simplifies a lot of things. And I will say with land, there are some oddball quirks about it that you don't have to think about with houses. So for example, like, why is this property vacant? Is it because you can't build on it? Is it useless? With a house, you don't have to think about that because there's a house there. But sometimes with land, like maybe the soil doesn't drain properly, or the soil isn't, it can't take enough pressure on it. Like if you build a house out there, it'll cave in, or maybe there's no road access or no utilities. So there's things you got to research and understand the usability of that land before you buy it, because that'll affect its value. And even establishing market values in the first place can be kind of tricky with land, because a lot of vacant lots, like they're literally one of a kind. There is no comparable, and the property isn't making money. So an appraiser doesn't really know what to do with it. They have no data to have a firm estimate on that. So, but that kind of goes back to the importance of making really low offers, because even if you're wrong, you've got a big profit margin built in to protect you.
I got a million questions, but it looks
Yeah,
like Ian knows
I'm
as
like
well,
still mind
so-
blown because like how many people are always like, I don't have money to do real estate, dude. You bought a property for $331. I mean, like that's a week's worth of groceries for some people, right? Like $331, like that's insane. And yeah, like you said, you only flipped it for 1,900, but my quick math is what, that's 5x your capital, right? Like that's
something like that.
insane, dude. And now what, just real quick, just for clarity's sake, and I know Jason's got a question, but you're just looking at raw land. Like you're not taking it, you're not getting it entitled. You're not putting any of the development stuff on it. You're just like, there's a piece of land here. I think I can get a deal on it. And I think I can more or less flip the contract similar to a wholesaler or a house flipper.
That's what I do, but you don't have to do it the way I do. I know plenty of people who are getting entitlements, or they are changing the zoning, or they're subdividing it. And that's where you kind of get to a new level where it takes more work and a little bit more know-how to make it happen. But that's where you could like buy a property for 80 grand and sell it for 300 grand. And it's mostly paperwork that you're doing. Like it's not like you're doing a whole lot of work. It's just doing what you need to do to make it more useful.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot more sunk capital, right? Like I think that's where, like if you look at the big home track home builders, Ryan or Lennar, they don't even do land development anymore. They let all the guys go out there, develop the land. They just pick up developed lots and just buy them day one because they don't want the financial risk, because there's a ton of financial risk in that development side of things.
Well, then they can do what they're experts at right away and start building.
Exactly.
When all that's done. So you're, the way that you typically like to do it is just straight raw land. Like, how do you I don't know. I'm guessing obviously now you're a lot more of an expert than you were at the beginning. But so maybe let's just talk about that first deal, because I think that's interesting to people. Like, how did you know what to offer them? How did you, like, who was the end buyer? And like, how did you know what to price it with to them? Like, what did they do with the project? You know, maybe let's just start with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, this can differ a little bit depending on if you're in a non-disclosure state where it's harder to see past sales prices of properties. But where I'm at in Michigan, it's pretty easy to see properties that had sold in the near vicinity, like in that same zip code. And you're basically just looking for similar size properties, or as similar as you can get. And then going back, ideally, like no more than 12 months. But if there's just nothing in the past 12 months, you could go back a few years.
Sure.
I mean, similar logic to what an appraiser would do. You're just trying to find whatever public information is out there to derive a per acre value of that property based on the most similar comps you can find. And this has gotten a lot easier than it was back then. It used to be like you could find like 3 comps total, like ever. And it just wasn't much information. So, but you know, I would use what information I could find to come up with what I thought was a ballpark market value that I could actually sell the thing for. Whatever that number was, I would go down to 10% of that. And I will say, it's a lot harder to do that today. I'd say you'd probably want to start more at 30% right now, just with the market that we're at. It also depends on the market and, you know, how competitive it is. But still, I mean, the idea is you just ratchet it way down to a price that you can't lose. Like, no matter what happens, I mean, worst case scenario, you can make a few $100, but you're not going to lose money because you're getting it almost for free, basically.
I mean, are there properties that are worth zero because you can't do anything with them, or is that still valuable to people? Like this guy you flipped it to, that you sold it to him for $1,800. Like, what did he do? You have any idea what he did with the property?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. So, what it comes down to is it's in the eye of the beholder, and what it's worth is just whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. And the interesting thing about land is that a lot of people buy land for illogical, emotional reasons. What they're buying is the dream of property ownership. And they have this idea that I'm going to go park my RV there on the weekends. I'm going to build my cottage someday and my grandkids. It's not going to happen. Like, the reality is that stuff is never going to happen, but they just want to say they own land and they love the idea of owning land. But practically speaking, it's not a smart move, but they do it anyway. And those are a lot of the people that I buy land from. It's because they made a dumb decision to buy something they weren't going to use. And so they get stuck with it and they're like, okay, 20 years have gone by. I haven't seen this property since the day I bought it. Just, I don't want to pay taxes anymore. Just take it. So really, in going back to the understanding that like people buy because of a dream, not because it makes logical sense. You can kind of play off that and get really good pictures that make the property look like a dream. You know, like, I mean, show it in its best possible light, put together a great description. I mean, don't misrepresent it. I'm just saying, like, get the facts and explain it as good as you possibly can. And, you know, sometimes it still might take, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, worst case scenario to sell the thing. And there's ways you can speed that up by offering seller financing in certain cases or promoting it more places. But yeah, I mean, the whole question of value, I mean, honestly, I've seen appraisals that licensed appraisers do on land. And I can tell you, like, they don't know what they're doing, like, because the information doesn't exist. So just because they put some number in a professional looking PDF doesn't make it correct. It just means that's their wild guess.
I get loan opportunities daily and they have appraisals in place. And I'm like, what? Yeah. That's just someone's opinion that doesn't have an economic interest in this.
Yeah, exactly.
In this property, you know, stuff where it's like, I don't know if this thing's even going to be buildable. Like, and I don't know. Well, did you do any due diligence on the first deal that you ever did? Just because, like, I don't even know what in that particular case, like, what type of due diligence?
Sure.
Would you even do on just straight raw land?
Mm-hmm. So the things that, I mean, I probably didn't look at everything I should have back then, but the kind of just the most obvious things I knew to look at was like the road access. Like, can I drive my car up onto it? Does there appear to be power lines anywhere nearby? Like, can I get electricity if they need to? You know, how large is it? I did a title search to make sure there weren't any outstanding title issues on it. And coming from the banking world, I kind of understood the importance of that and like what it even meant and how to actually implement it. Trying to think what else I might have done. I mean, I got a satellite picture of it to understand what the boundaries were, and I drove out and took pictures of it, which, by the way, was not necessary. But I spent a ton of time driving up there an hour away from my house to do that. There's much more economical ways you can do that, but basically just kind of a common sense approach of like, does this appear to be useful? Or is there some major, like, is that swamp? You know, if it's not usable, then that would change things. But
well, I think, I know there's like other like tax strategies. People buy land for tax displacement and some other stuff. But like, I'm thinking about it, and you're talking about, like you said, offer somewhere between 10 and 30%, and it made me think, like, Jason, do you guys even lend on land? Like, and if you did, I'm assuming it'd be stupidly low.
Well, infill
LTV.
lots.
Yeah.
Infill lots are easy.
Yeah, but with entitlements.
Sometimes.
Right?
Yeah.
Generally they have entitlements. I'm talking about like raw land.
They're ready to build. No, because I don't know. I mean, typically, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but the last deal that someone presented to us, their soft costs, I think, were like $80,000 between engineering reports and surveys and just to determine if you can even build on it. Yeah. And I don't know if that's high, I don't know if that's low, but my thought process was like, cool, you get through all that and you have a buildable lot, then we can do the construction. Right? Then we can do the construction component on it. Yeah. Because they wanted us to fund that part, and I was like, what happens if it doesn't? Like, I don't know if it's a high likelihood or low likelihood that stuff like that goes through or not. I just don't know.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. This vacant lot that I bought for my storage facility. Because historically, I've not done a lot of this, but you're right. I mean, I remember I had to spend probably $20,000 just to find out, like, can I use it? if the answer was no, I just wasted $20,000. It's kind of so you kind of look at it like just visually. Does it look like I can? Is there any obvious thing jumping out at me? Because if so, that's a big red flag. But if you don't see any of that stuff, that's when you can kind of start taking further steps. And there is a surprising amount you can find out for free if you just put in the effort to do that. And if you maybe pay for a couple subscriptions to services that will give you this information, like the actual like questions of like, this is a big question mark, we don't know about that. There's actually usually not that much stuff. Like maybe like even the topography issue, like that was one issue with my property. It was all kind of jacked up with, holes in it and like a cliff over here. And You can engineer anything on any property if you're willing to spend the money on it. So it's just a question of understanding, like, what are the limitations? What are the risks here?
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And before like we get to like, you going back into like actual rental real estate, like you've explored a lot in the land business. And, we were talking out at that mastermind about like, what land looks like for you going forward. Have you ventured outside of Michigan now?
Yeah.
Are you flipping land all across the country, or you just stay specifically in Michigan?
Yeah. So when I got started, I had this idea in my mind that I had to be able to drive to the property and see it with my own eyes, or I wasn't going to buy it. And I mean, I will say there is some benefit in being able to set eyes on it. Like, it always looks a little bit different than I thought when I actually see it in person. But a few years into this, I bought my first property. It was 4 hours away, and it was right on Lake Huron with 500 feet of beach frontage. And I paid $4,500 for it, and I sold it 5 months later for $45,000. And to this day, I've never seen that property. And when I did that, I was like, you know what? If I could do that, why couldn't I do this anywhere? Like, a lot of the information I need is on Google Earth. It's on Google Street View. I can call a local realtor to drive by and take pictures for me. Like, I don't technically need to be where these properties are. And so yeah, nowadays I own land in states I've never been to, and it's totally feasible. There can be other oddball issues that come up with, like, say if you want to offer seller financing, which is a big deal in land because of the financing issue and the difficulty at understanding collateral value. But with seller financing, some states kind of make it hard, or they make it difficult to get your property back, or jump through weird hoops to foreclose. So there's different things you got to understand about that. But in terms of just opportunity, there's opportunity everywhere.
Yeah, I think a friend of ours that's in the storage world, he does a lot of land flipping. He's in California, but he does a lot in the desert of Arizona. And I'm just like,
there's a lot that goes down there. I was shocked by it at first, but there's tons of money to be made in the desert.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm like, well, what do they do with it? They're like, I don't know. They just buy the land. I'm like, okay. Like, I don't know. I guess future expansion, and they're not going to make more land, I guess, is the story, right? Like, is that and that's the story that everybody goes with. Just buy land. Like, we have acreage in upstate New York near Fort Drum, and we go because we have a cabin up there. My in-laws do, but it's like, dude, you buy land for really cheap, but then there's also no like intrinsic value behind it other than vacation, and nobody wants to drive 5 hours to get there. So it's like, I get how, like, yeah, you can buy it for cheap, but then what do you do with it? And I guess, like you said, you're selling the dream. Along with all real estate, you're always selling the dream, right?
Yeah, so, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of areas, even in populated areas, that have very inexpensive raw land.
Southern Maryland, right where you are, Jay, like just down the street, right?
Well,
like I could drive
anywhere, outside, the burbs. Like, there's rural areas that do so. I don't know if it's worth any money. I don't even know how to determine if it's worth any money.
Yeah. No, it just proves, like, real estate, any industry, there's always a way to make a buck, man. It's just like mind-boggling to me of like.
So typically, do you? I mean, we'll use the term wholesaling. I mean, I know the term wholesaling sometimes and flipping overlap. Are most of these things getting put under contract and then getting resold, or you taking ownership first, and then selling them?
Yeah, it can go either way. I've done both. More often than not, I'll just buy the thing and own it and then sell it. Sometimes it just feels cleaner, and I can have total control, and I don't have to, maneuver around weird state laws and stuff like that. But I've also done it where you just get under contract and you assign the purchase agreement to somebody else. Or if it's like a development situation where you want to buy like 5 lots next to each other, you could put an option on it and do it that way. It just kind of gives you time and control for a limited period of time. Sure. But usually what I do is I just buy it outright. But I do know some people, though, who just specifically stick to assigning contracts, and that's all they do. And they can make 6 figures a year doing just that. So.
Yeah, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if it's probably not your specialty, but like some of these, like they have options on these contracts to extend forever for like just another $500 or another 1,000, whatever the number is. It doesn't matter, but that's like commonplace in the land world because you're getting your development rights or whatever, that you keep optioning yourself out. I guess that's the benefit of land.
Why? Because you want to continue to make sure what you're trying to put together.
Well, so just having conversation. you met Jimmy Harris, Seth.
Yeah.
Like talking with Jimmy about it, he said when he was developing them, he wouldn't take title. It'd be an option in the contract to say, we're getting our development rights. Well, in Maryland, sometimes you get stuff rezoned. It's 4-year process. So you're just paying whatever, $1,000 every quarter until you get your rezoning or whatever it is, and then you take title to it once all your development's in play. And I know that it's somewhat commonplace in that business.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like seller financing where it's like there's a lot you can do. It just depends on how creative you want to get and what both parties are willing to accept and comply with.
Yeah, and I guess on the seller side of things, it's like, I got this piece of land, but I never did anything with it, and I know the challenges to it, so I better help this guy out. Otherwise, I'm never going to get my money, right? Like, so I guess it's like you have a motivated seller per se that understands the challenges that you're about to engage on, right? So I could see how it's like, they're more motivated than say a lady that got her house from her grandmother and she's going to make $1 million with it, right? So it's an interesting way to look at the business. So obviously, like you've done a ton of land. You've taught a lot of people about it. Like, what was your motivation to get back into owning real estate? Because it sounded like you had some troubles early on, a little trauma around it. Now you're like, all right, I'm going to get into the storage game. Like, what was that pivot? Like, were you buying rentals all along, or were you like, oh no, I need to create cash flow and this is how I'm going to do it?
Yeah. I had bought a couple of duplexes during the time that, like, from 2011 to 2014. I sold them in 2019. I just, there was no trauma with that. I just wasn't really doing it right. I wasn't all in. Like, I was just kind of, piddling around. I wasn't like seriously trying to grow it like you've done, Ian. So I kind of just got out of that, and the self-storage thing. So I think, like, even for a lot of land flippers out there, I don't think they should continue doing land flipping forever. I think it's a stepping stone. It's a great way to generate lots of cash without requiring a huge upfront investment and a ton of risk. But like the reality is it's a flipping business. Like, if you don't keep pedaling, you're on a hamster wheel that pays really well forever. So my goal anyway is to siphon that cash off and put it into long-term buy and hold stuff, just like a lot of people do. But I think if you don't have that kind of cash machine to create that capital to do that, it's going to take a long time to get there. So land just enables you to get there a lot faster. So for me, self-storage is stage 2, where I'm actually creating that,
I'm glad that you recognize that. I do, because, a lot of real estate investors, I think their focus is like, okay, well, I'm doing this now. I'm just going to do more of it, and I'm going to get bigger, and then I'm going to put a team in place. And by all means, you can do that. But I think a lot of us, and I think the younger version of a lot of us want to do hey, let's just get the quick hits and then just do more quick hits and then you're not really building anything, and you're not really providing wealth. So I think that's important, where it's like, hey, this is a strategy, a mechanism, a wheelhouse that I know I can make good money in over and over and over and over, and I'm going to take those profits and turn them into other things, knowing obviously the biggest downfall of short-term real estate investing is the way it's taxed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think I've seen a lot of people burn out on land investing because not even because it's necessarily hard, but it almost gets boring after a while. Like, when you do the same land deal again, like, the excitement is just not there anymore. It's awesome the first dozen deals you do, but eventually it's like, okay, like, there's got to be more. Like, the money's great, but like, where's this going? I want to feel like I'm getting somewhere, and that's why I think it's important to have some kind of long-term plan to create streams of income that don't go away.
Yeah, we talked about this on, like, not only at the mastermind, but when I hopped on your podcast, we talked about this exact thing. It was like, well, what makes you successful? And it's doing something over and over and over again. Like that, you understanding land, I presume, allows you to find a good lot to go develop self-storage on. The same way Jason does 1 billion loans, then he knows what deals he wants to invest in. The same way we got really good at single family. And I know you're kind of downplaying it, but like, I think people need to get really good at one specific thing inside their asset class, whatever that is, and dominate it. And then you can go out and say, okay, well, I'm really good at this. Let me go see how I can apply this into different asset classes. And along those lines, like, how did you find the lot to develop your self-storage facility?
Yeah, that was actually, there was no trick to it. I just went on landsearch.com, which just collects a lot of different MLS listings, and I bought it at, I thought it was a little under market value, but it was not a huge discount. The motivation behind that was it was near me, and I understood the market, and I saw the potential, and I verified that there was potential there. So, yeah, that one, see, that wasn't bought with a flip in mind. That was bought with, substantial improvement in mind. I bought it as a residential lot, and then I had to rezone it to commercial, and like just that made it worth like 40 grand more. So it's kind of, and that was the first time I had ever rezoned anything, but it's another example of a different avenue you can go in the land business if you're willing to do that work of, changing the property, what could be done with it. That can go a long way.
Yeah, and knowing what it takes, because like I said, here in Maryland, certain jurisdictions, it takes 4 years. Like the window's only open for this,
Yeah.
and if you don't get it, you're on the block for 4 years again until you can get it, unless you get special variances or entitlements or whatever else. But yeah, dude, it's crazy, and some states are easier than others, right? Like that's why people like operating in the South or certain color states, because it's just easier to get stuff done, which is also interesting too. But all that land knowledge that you have is like applicable. Like I think about it, Jay, how many times you see people that have like, they come to you, they're like, oh, I got a single family house. And they got all this additional acreage. It's like, man, they should just subdivide it and sell that off. And they don't need all that. And they're still going to get the same value for the house. Like it's just another tool in the toolbox. And most people don't take the time. Look, I'm never going to do what Seth does. Right. But now that I'm like, oh man, I got Seth, like I met him at a mastermind. I kind of understand what he does. Now, like when I look at deals, I'm like, yo, let's just lop that lot off and like, let's sell that. Right. And that could be intrinsic value to us. And it doesn't change the metrics of your original deal. And it's just, I think everybody should learn what everyone else does to have a tool in your toolbox for that one deal that pops up. So,
yeah,
no doubt. Is there anything else related to like a tip or a trick related to flipping land, off top of your head?
Yeah, I could probably think of 1,000 of them, but just trying to think of something that's like directly relevant. I think one thing that's kind of helpful to know about oneself, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, Ian, on our podcast, but there's, I don't know whoever came up with this, but I've heard there's this hunter and the farmer mentality. So hunters enjoy the thrill of the chase. Like they do really well in a sales scenario, like a flipping business. They'd probably be great at that because they have to constantly chase after the next opportunity. But farmers are more of, they're okay with the monotony. They're okay with the waiting. It's okay. They just want like permanent, steady, predictable income. And kind of just looking at myself, like I'm a pretty strong farmer. Like I'm okay with that. Other people would die if they had to do that. Like they need something to keep their adrenaline going. And I don't know what you guys are, but I think anybody listening to this, it's helpful to just think through that and be like, what am I? Because that might inform you on what kind of business you should go into, or even whatever business you are in. Like what role should you be performing? Like, should you be somebody who's doing the monotonous stuff, but enjoys the stability, or the opposite?
Oh yeah. Yep. Jason, we wound up on a long disc personality test, not only in person, but on the podcast as well. But it's the same principles, right? And, I as you talk about hunting and gathering, and I'm like, all right, what am I? I enjoy the hunt of finding the deal, but I love the gathering of the collection of properties that then are like a water faucet of cash flow that comes in. It's like, well, what are you? And it's like, you got to recognize what you are in each situation and apply that purposefully.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you might be one of those gifted people that can do both, and that's a huge asset if that's true. Just being able to mold to what is needed in that situation instead of being stuck in one mindset all the time and you can't think outside of that.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, I mean, this has been pretty awesome. When we originally hopped on, when we were, with the topic of land flipping, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. But I gained some knowledge personally. And again, there's always buyers and sellers in everything. And there really is. And, again, like, I guess, there's so many darn strategies related to this. Not only ways to structure the deals, but also the type of land, like you talked about. Like, hey, do you want to just flip land that's kind of ready to build that you can negotiate from somebody at a good price, or you want to start with the raw land at the cheapest price? And listen, a lot of real estate investors, like Ian was saying earlier, they want to get into real estate investing and they feel like, oh, well, I don't have the funds, or I want to start small, or I don't want to take on so much risk. And it seems like what you said, there's, pretty low barrier to entry at the beginning to do so. And as they grow and they want to do bigger and better deals, they can obviously do so. But there's, a lot of folks in some markets get nervous about doing deals because the barrier to entry is high, just because they're, like, in our areas, they're very expensive deals. Like, you gotta be involved in $200,000+ deals just to get your feet wet. And I think that's challenging for a lot of folks that might not want to put up $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 into their first deal and get it levered. And I think land could potentially be a good strategy for them.
Yeah, I would say with land, the biggest, it's almost mostly a mental barrier to entry. Like, I think with, I don't know, I wouldn't have any less than $5,000, but $10,000 would be a good amount to start with. But the way most people start finding deals is through direct mail. But I know if you've never done direct mail before, and if you haven't seen it proven, you don't know that you know how to do it. It can be, you're kind of going out on a limb, like dropping $3,000 on direct mail that you might be flushing if nobody calls and nobody does a deal with you. And that's a hard thing to get over. And once you do that first deal, like, everything changes. The light bulb goes off. It's a lot easier to jump back into it. But it's a place where people get hung up a lot, I think. And I get why. But I think what you're just saying there, Jason, when you compare that to any other business on earth that takes so much more money to even play ball and fail at that, it's a lot easier by comparison.
Oh yeah. And it can be scary. We talked about my first house. Jason's talked about his first loan. You talked about your first property. We're talking about minimal amount of money, and everyone's like, well, they only ever see our results, and they're like, oh damn, Seth's got it figured out, Jason's got it figured out, Ian's got it figured out. No, dude, like, we don't have it figured out. We just have been grinding at the same thing over and over again, and the deals have just become bigger. And that's some of that comes with financial wherewithal, doing the right deals all the way through this whole thing. But we were there too. We were at the very, very beginning, and we all ate shit at one point, right? Like, it's a long road to get where we are. You mentioned, and we like to ask all our guests, you mentioned that you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but, like, I don't know if you're a podcast or a book guy, like, what's, like, one good book or podcast that you're listening to right now that you think everybody should know about?
Yeah, I've always got like 4 different books I'm listening to at the same time on Audible. Let me quick check what's going on there. So I just started this book, Die with Zero, which I'm pretty sure I already know what it's all about. I've heard tons of people talking about it, but it's this idea that, some people work really hard and just save a bunch of money, and then they die and they give it to the kids. But it's this idea of, you actually want to enjoy your money at the most opportune times in life, when you're able-bodied and your kids are the age when you can enjoy it the most. And if they're going to inherit some money, like, give it to them while you're still alive, so you can see the fruits of that. Don't just, like, let it all happen when you're gone. But it's kind of a different way of thinking, but it made a lot of sense to me. So I'm listening to that one right now. I can't say I love it yet, but everybody I've talked to seems to love it.
I feel like I heard Hormozy talk about that. Alex Hormozy talk about that book.
Yeah, he might have
recently. Because his philosophy, from what I heard on a recent podcast, and we don't have to go down that while we're trying to wrap up, but he's like, hey, you play the game, and then as soon as the game's over and you die, you're just reset. Everything's zero again. And then the next person plays the game. So it's kind of along this similar lines.
Yeah, and it goes similar along the lines, kind of where Jason and I, like, we always like doing best guests of, like, or interview guests of, like, where we are mentally. And recently we had a friend of ours who he worked at a family office, and it was all discussing trust and how you leave money to your heirs, to your family, and all this other different stuff. And as you guys can see from me, I got the gray and the beard, so we know we're getting to the side of life where you need to start thinking about these things. So I think I'm going to pick that book up and listen to it and put it on the list of things to get through. So I appreciate that.
You're talking about your beard. I thought you said you're going to shave it all.
I should shave it all. If you notice the open, we still got to update the open. I'm still cleanly shaven there. But
I saw that. I was like, well, who is that? Oh,
yeah, those were
why
the
not?
firefighting days, Seth. Those were the firefighting days.
Just shave the beard, and then you won't have any grays.
I could do that, but then I got double chin, so I think the gray is like a little more in than the double and triple chins. So I'm just gonna leave that on there. Seth, I appreciate you coming on. Where's the best place that people can find you on the internet if they want to get a hold of you, they want to learn about land flipping? Where's the best place people can do that?
Yes, if you want to check out land flipping, so I made a blog post that's kind of like a little course that's free. It kind of explains it all. Just go to landflippinglifecycle.com. That'll forward you to that. Otherwise, retipster.com is sort of like the home base where you can find everything. Our YouTube channel, podcast, it's all kind of flows out of there. And if you're on social media, just search for RE Tipster and you'll find us on all those places.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. retipster.com. Go out, check out Seth. He's got great content out there, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate
Thanks, guys. You bet.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.